My name is Brian Lischer. I'm founder and CEO of Ignyte, and I'm an outlier.
Welcome to Outlier on Air with Ever Gonzalez, the show where we interview the founders, disruptors, and mavens of the world. Learn how grit, failure, and success are all a part of the entrepreneurial journey.
Hey everybody, welcome to Outlier on Air, the podcast where we interview founders, disruptors, and mavens. As always, I'm your host, Ever Gonzalez. On today's episode, we have Brian Lischer. He is the founder and CEO of Ignyte. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Ever. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. You have such a unique background and such a fun background with the things that you've done and just the kind of personality that you seem to have that we're really looking forward to kind of just diving in and getting to know you.
Absolutely. Let's do this.
Now, before we truly get started, tell us where you're calling us from.
I'm calling from San Diego today, which is also my birthplace. Lived here most of my life. So it's a place I call home. And
So jealous. So jealous. Yeah. Most of the country, this is being recorded in December. Most of the country is under snow. And here you are in beautiful San Diego. I'm sure beautiful weather right now, right?
Absolutely. Sunny, wearing t-shirt and jeans. So it doesn't get much better than this.
What a jerk. Come on. You're making us feel bad. So let's talk about San Diego for a sec, because I love kind of getting into where all of the people that we interview, where they're from, how they work, and things like that. San Diego is a kind of a hotbed for startups and entrepreneurship. They're exactly where you are. What's that vibe like? What's that scene like there for you?
Yeah, the San Diego startup environment, it's definitely thriving compared to what it was, let's say, 5 years ago. But there's a lot of hype. I think it's been a little blown out of proportion.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you hear about it in the media, people seeing San Diego as the next Silicon Valley. And while it's definitely thriving compared to what it used to be, San Diego is no Silicon Valley, and it probably never will be. But
And that's okay.
It's okay. I like it. I like being in a secondary market. There's a lot more opportunity. It's more of that underdog market. And I mean, nothing beats living in San Diego. It's got a great culture, great lifestyle, and it is what it is. But I recently read a statistic actually that only about 2% of all capital raised in the U.S. in 2015 was funneled into San Diego-based startups. And the majority of those startups were in the biotech space.
Oh, really?
So there's a lot of opportunity here, but I'd say San Diego is one of the country's best kept secrets. So we'll keep it that way.
That's right. So you kind of mentioned some of the pros of living there, working there, and we can obviously imagine some of the rest. Are there any cons? Anything that kind of is bad about living and working in San Diego? More working out of San Diego.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything bad about living in San
Diego.
Diego.
For sure.
But as far as working in San Diego, I would say one of the cons is that it's a little bit slower pace. So if you're actually trying to do business in San Diego, there is a little bit of that laid back mentality. So if you look at Southern California, even heading up to Orange County or LA, of course, you got San Francisco up there. There's a lot more hustling going on up there. So that gets a little frustrating for myself when I'm doing business development here in San Diego. Everyone is, for the most part, much more conservative as far as the risks they're taking in their business, and a little bit more conservative when it comes to investing into their brand. So there are some limitations, but there's a lot of opportunities, and we live in a virtual world. So just because you live in San Diego doesn't mean you have to only do business in San Diego.
Well, right off the bat, congratulations for living in San Diego and doing what you do there. It's a beautiful place. We love it down there. Well, let's get started. Now, you are an entrepreneur, an author, a speaker, a brand strategist. But what I want to focus on for this episode is, your background, what you're doing now, the good, the bad, and the ugly of your entrepreneurial journey. But I think the overall theme for this is going to be what you're good at, right? The psychology of branding. I want to get into that in detail here in just a sec. But before we do that, let's kind of establish you and your company right now. Tell us about Ignyte. What is it? How does it work? Why should we care?
Yeah, great. So Ignyte, we're an award-winning branding agency, and we specialize in brand strategy, identity, and storytelling. And we've helped transform brands in a variety of industries: healthcare, life sciences, technology, financial services. An area that we're really focused on right now is the healthcare space. And I don't think there's an industry out there that's in more dire need of rebranding. I mean, the whole industry has been flipped upside down. There's so much change happening. The consumerization of healthcare, more of a retail experience in healthcare. So you have a lot of companies that have survived this transformation. There is a lot of transactions going on, a lot of M&A activity. So companies are being bought up, and they're having somewhat of an existential crisis. They're asking those questions: Who are we? Who are we becoming? When a company is acquired, how does that brand relate to the parent brand? What's the brand architecture? How are consumers changing? What's that new patient experience like? What are their needs, wants, desires, motivations? Really getting into the psyche of the healthcare consumer, which is changing radically. So it's really about just getting in there and doing the research and working with these companies to develop an optimal position. So there's a lot of opportunity in the healthcare space, and we don't work with any old brand. So we're looking for companies that are more purpose-driven and that really appreciate doing that research and going inward and doing introspection and interviewing their employees, interviewing their customers, really trying to find the truth. Companies that don't work well with us are the ones that can't handle the truth, that they're afraid to know what their employees think about the brand. They're afraid to know what their customers think about the brand. They'll never say that, but those fears come up in the business development process. They push back really hard on the research component of the rebranding project. And that's just where you have to part ways, because you can't rebrand a national, brand without going and doing some research first.
Size-wise for you, client-wise, does it matter?
Yeah, there are certainly some limitations. We work with startups, so the projects are just smaller. Mm-hmm. So we do a lot of naming projects. We've done over a dozen naming projects in the past year and a half. So coming up with a name for a company, an identity. If they have budget, we could do some strategy and positioning. But it's getting harder to do comprehensive rebranding projects for smaller businesses. So we're really aiming more at the lower middle market, anywhere from 50 million to $500 million a year in revenue. But it just really depends on what the client's business is, what they're trying to get out of the rebranding, and really how much they value branding. I've talked with companies that are doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year in revenue, if not billions, and they aren't willing to invest $50,000 into their brand, where we work with companies that are doing less than $1 million a year in revenue, and they will invest $50,000, $80,000 into rebranding because they see the value in it and they believe in the process.
Branding is so fascinating to me, right? Because we all feel different about it. We all, love it or hate it or think it's necessary, not necessary, whatever, right? Everybody has their own strong opinions about it. But it's interesting how, you mentioned some companies are up for it while others are not. I see, like, personal experience, outlier, right? This is our company, this is our brand. We're trying to do certain things here. It would be difficult to either part ways with it or tweak it or do different things just because I feel like it's my baby. I'm assuming a lot of these startups feel the same way, or some of the entrepreneurs that you work with. Do you get a lot of pushback when it comes to rebranding? I guess if you're helping them brand it, it's a different story, but the rebranding or the retelling of the story, do you get pushback from your clients there? And how do you go about it?
Absolutely. So there's different dynamics going on that map back to the different size of organizations. So when you're working with smaller businesses, you're typically working with the founders or the company owners, and there's a lot of emotional ties there. And sometimes it's hard for them to step back and get that perspective. We ran into that more in the early years. But it's more about vetting the clients and finding the ones that are most suited for that process. When you work with bigger companies, now you're working with executives that did not start the business. They have more of an objective perspective on the brand, and it's much easier to work with them. But sometimes they aren't as emotionally invested into the process. They might be checking their phone during their rebranding workshop. And when you're working with a small business owner that is investing a huge amount of money for them, they're there, they're present, and they're really engaged in the process, and they really appreciate the work that you do for them. It's nothing feels better than helping a small business get ahead and really transforming their brand from an objective perspective too. And that's one thing that really differentiates Ignyte from other agencies out there that say they do branding. We like to say that we're a real branding agency, and we take an objective approach to rebranding. So it's not about what I want or what my team wants or what's cool or trendy at the time. It's not even about what our clients want. And I'll say that to clients sometimes and get mixed reactions to that, but it's true. It's especially if you're working with a larger brand. It's not about what the CEO wants or the CFO or the chief marketing officer. It's really about what's right for this brand, and it's that executive team's responsibility to set the vision. But then we help transform their brand in such a way that it's going to get them there. And so it's about removing that personal subjectivity from the process and really relying on research, taking a data-driven approach to rebranding and really getting into the psyche of the brand and its key stakeholders, primarily employees and your customers, and using those different reference points to really hone in on what is the truth. Where is that overlap?
Well, let's talk about that for a sec. Let's get into it. Is branding and the things that you're doing, is it more of an art or a science, a mix? Where do you fall in that whole perspective?
I'd say it leans, the way that we approach it is, and there's many different aspects of branding. So storytelling is a part of branding, and that's, I'd say, much more on the artistic side. But when it comes to the research and strategy, it's very rooted in science. Mm-hmm. So we pull from the fields of behavioral and cognitive sciences. So we actually have a PhD researcher on our team that does all of our customer and internal brand research. We pull from the fields of psychology, from semiotics, so the study of the meaning behind signs and symbols, mythology, Joseph Campbell's archetypes and the Jungian archetypes. We actually work with brand archetypes to identify which archetype is manifested within a brand, and then that becomes the context and the texture for telling the stories. 6 months down the road, after we've done all the research, position the brand, and now we need to activate the brand and bring it to life. We use tools like archetypes, which are just these universal symbols that we could tap into to create meaning that's authentic to the brand.
And this kind of has a little bit to do with your own personal background as well, right? I mean, you went to school, if I remember correctly, you studied psychology, right? I mean, this is something
that's correct.
That you, I'm assuming, love and are pretty good at it yourself. I mean, not just your team, but you, and this is where your interest lies. Tell us about the whole approach between branding and psychology, or the psychology of branding.
Absolutely. It's a great question. So I've always been fascinated by the way people think and the way they make meaning. And so those interests landed me at UCSD, University of California, San Diego, where I studied psychology and communication. And when I started college, I thought that I actually wanted to be a clinical psychologist. And it didn't take me long, though, to realize that profession would be extremely limiting for me. and that while I was fascinated in the behavioral sciences, I really wanted to get into this quote unquote business world, which I didn't really know what that meant at the time. Uh, so I continued to study psychology. I also started to study some economics. That didn't quite feel like the right fit, so I wound up studying communication as well. And I think between the psychology and the communication, it's by no surprise, fast forward a few years, that I wound up in the field of marketing as a career. So working in design and marketing, which is really all about how people think and the way they make meaning. So
right out of school, did you know that this was what it was gonna look like for you at this point in your life, or did you just kind of stumble across this, or what was that process like?
yeah, I always knew at that point that I was going to work in the field of advertising or marketing or design. I wasn't really tuned into the branding process at the time, or the branding world. So I actually got started in the early 2000s doing digital marketing and SEO, working for an agency here in San Diego. And if you look back to 2003, 2002, that time, it was really the Wild West of digital marketing. So it was a lot of fun and just completely new discipline as far as SEO and stuff like banner advertising. So that's really how I cut my teeth and got my start. And then I actually left there and I started doing consulting work for several years. And one of my clients was actually my dad's company, San Diego Instruments, and they manufacture neuroscience instruments for behavioral research. So there's another tie into the psychology as well, the neuroscience behind things. So this was around the time of the recession. So I was doing consulting work for them for a couple years. And then 2007, 2008 came around, and it became really hard to find work, whether that was through consulting or trying to get a full-time job somewhere. So I went on full-time working for my dad's company, and I was able to manage all their marketing and able to create that connection between the offline and the online world. I know it sounds just cliche and kind of meaningless now to talk about that, but
did that come easy to you?
It did. Yeah, absolutely. And I had an edge with that background in the digital marketing, even in 2007, 2008, in a field like the neuroscience industry. A lot of the competition had very little insight into how to make that work for them, for their company. So it was at a time where trade shows and catalogs were still a dominant force in generating leads. So it was about leveraging that and then getting that information online, knowing how to do search engine optimization to get the right people to the website and start converting them into leads and new customers.
And so Ignyte is what, 3 years old?
Yeah, about 3.5 years old now.
So what was the process there when you were like, well, I think I can do this on my own and I'm going to do it? Was it a hard decision? Was it about time type of decision, or what was going through your head as you decided to start Ignyte?
Yeah, great question. So I'd take a step back and talk about the job that I had previous to starting Ignyte. Mm-hmm. So after I left my dad's company, just working for small businesses was limiting. So I wanted to get back into the agency environment, and I landed a job at one of the largest digital marketing agencies in San Diego at the time. So working with really big brands, big national and global brands. I was working as manager of strategy and business development. So it was just a great opportunity to get in there, work with bigger brands. And, it started off as a really great experience. The culture was fun and energetic and innovative, had an awesome manager who was really more of a mentor to me. A lot of creative freedom and autonomy, but all good things must come to an end. And this was probably around 2010, 2011. the recession actually hit the agency world a little bit late, and it delivered a blow. So the culture really changed at that agency. I was able to survive several rounds of layoffs, but the culture just became really toxic.
I bet after
And
several rounds of layoffs, yeah, I can see that happening.
yeah, it became a culture of fear and paranoia, and all my creative freedom and autonomy was stripped away. So it was a really miserable situation, and I felt trapped. But during that time, it allowed me to reflect and to take a look at the type of work that I was doing, and that's when I realized that I was much more passionate about this field called branding than I was the marketing. So as we were working with clients, I was much more interested in working on the brand and fixing the messaging and the inauthenticity within a brand than actually going out and promoting it. So I just honed in on that interest, and I was actually working with a recruiter at the time, interviewing for with branding agencies up in San Francisco. And that's actually when I was finally laid off of that job. So that was a huge relief, but at the same time, a little bit unsettling that I was living ahead of my means at the time. I had this really cool loft in downtown San Diego. And so as much of a relief as it was, I also had to make some tough decisions. And so at the time, I was going to give myself 2 weeks to take off and really just enjoy life. And at the time, 2 weeks seemed like an eternity. It's kind of laughable looking back at it now. But within that 2 weeks, I actually realized that I was really unhappy and unfulfilled in my life, and I needed to look into that more. And in order to do so, I really needed to create some space and some time and not just jump right back into finding another job. I needed to fix what wasn't working, but I had to first identify what that was. So I wound up breaking the lease to my loft, selling most of my stuff, and moving back in with my parents here in San Diego.
Was that tough? I'm assuming it was tough, right?
It was a little tough because I had this identity that I had built up about myself, but at the same time, it wasn't working for me anymore. So I was just getting into my early 30s at the time, and it was a lot of change going on in my life. So I just saw it as an opportunity to reset. And I went on different types of journeys during this time. I'd call them spiritual journeys. And one of them, I spent some time out in Salt Lake City in Utah, and I bought a season's pass to my favorite mountain to go snowboarding.
Nice.
And I rented out. The cost of living is much less out in Salt Lake City than it is San Diego. So I was able to spend some time out there and just live off the severance that I got from my last job, as well as some unemployment. So I spent, I'd say, a good 10, 11 months total without working, without thinking about work, and eventually ran out of money.
Throughout this whole period, were you truly relaxing and just doing these things, or was it starting to creep in like, oh shoot, I got to do something here pretty quick?
I was completely relaxing.
Really?
I was actually thinking about not going back to the corporate world or the agency environment and actually just being a snowboard instructor. So I was really just letting go of everything. And it's that process of letting go created the space for something new to create. I mean, the reality is I'd be bored to death if I was a snowboard instructor. But it was going through that process that I came back to San Diego, and it was so clear to me that I just could not work for anyone else ever again, and that there wasn't the perfect agency or the perfect company or the perfect role for me out there, that I needed to go create it. I needed to create my own company, and I needed to live a life that was authentic and true to this new version of myself. that process over the year was really about stripping away all these layers of pieces of me that weren't authentic. The decisions I made, being living a life that I thought other people wanted me to live, or trying to be something to someone who wasn't really true to me. You get lost in all that. And so I was able to just strip it all away and come back with such a deep sense of who I am, why I exist, what I stand for, and what I was going to do moving forward with my life, which was forge this new path, which wasn't entirely clear at the time. I didn't have the clear sense of what I was creating. I just knew that I had to do it.
And it sounds like, bigger, stronger, better than ever at this point. How are you feeling about what you're doing now and the direction that you're headed in?
Yeah, I couldn't feel any better. I've really just, it's really important to me to make decisions along the way, including today where I'm at, that are true to myself, that I don't compromise, that I don't, for example, a deal, if it doesn't feel like a good fit, it'd be really easy to come in and act like I was someone who I wasn't, just to appeal to the prospective client, or to take on a client that didn't feel like a good fit just because it was good money. I still have those temptations. I'm only human, but it's about having the strength and the courage to say no.
And that's hard to do, right?
It is, absolutely. And so it was only in hindsight that I would say maybe a year and a half into starting Ignyte that I was able to look back and realize that what I'm building here, this rebranding process, this branding agency, pulling in these different types of people, that what we're doing for companies through going through this rebranding process is an exact parallel to what I did in my own personal life.
Ooh, nice.
In a couple years before that. Is about stripping away all those different layers and finding the truth of who I was. That's the same thing we do with the branding process, with the rebranding. And so that's when it really started to sink in that this is my calling. When it comes to business, it couldn't be any other way, that this is what I'm meant to do, and is really help companies figure out who they are, why they exist, what they stand for. And it's really about helping them discover their authenticity and then helping them express it. So that's the art and the science. The discovery is the science and the art is the expression.
This is what fascinates me. I consider you obviously a creative, right? But now you being this creative person now is also in a position where you have to run an actual company with how many employees, by the way?
We have about 10 of us right now, between part-time and full-time.
So that's a legit company with, payroll and tax, all that good stuff, right? How do the two mix, the businessman and the creative side of you?
Yeah, so I would say the creative side of me, the strategist, that's something that I feel like I've truly mastered. It's something I could do in my sleep, right? And I still oversee creative direction and strategy for all of our key accounts. But what really excites me now, that area that's new to me, and I would say where the biggest challenges are, is how do I build this business? Mm-hmm. And how do I build a sustainable business? That my goal is, I always see having Ignyte as part of my ecosystem, but how do I create it over the next 5 to 10 years in such a way that I don't need to be there anymore, that it's running itself, that I've replaced myself, and that I could just be the chairman. I see it as an opportunity. I want to start other businesses. I've also realized that I get really excited about starting things more than managing them. So Ignyte,
welcome to the club, right?
Yeah. So Ignyte is, I need to see this through. I need to build it up to a place. And I just feel like that's part of the process for me and my purpose. But then once I do that once, it's really just about, I want to go out there, start different things, get involved in ventures. I'm already doing it now. I'm running projects through Ignyte, exchanging it for equity in other companies. So I always have a purpose for Ignyte, to have a really world-class branding agency. But my goal isn't to grow it into some 500-person firm. It's really about keeping it small and just doing really amazing work.
So I know you kind of laid it out a little bit, but so then what is this going to look like in 3 years, both company-wise and personally for you?
Yeah, in 3 years, I just want to be half of the way to replacing myself fully. Yeah. So yeah, and that's the entrepreneurial journey for me, and that's really the next step to figure out. And I like it. It excites me because it is challenging. I don't know. I don't know what to expect. It's every day, once I start to feel like I'm comfortable, that's when I get really worried.
Oh, really?
Nice. That I'm not pushing myself hard enough, that I'm not pushing myself past my personal boundaries. I have a fear of becoming complacent. And I was just reflecting recently that there's no better job than being an entrepreneur to avoid that state. You just can't be complacent. You fail. You can't take your eye off the ball for 1 minute. So it's just that always on, always hustling, always trying to improve, and it's really well suited for me and my personality type.
Yeah, I love that you are doing what you're doing. I think it does fit your personality from what we know from you and just this last half an hour that we've been talking to you. And it sounds like you are exactly where you need to be right now, personally, business-wise, all that good stuff. But there must be something that either you're struggling with or something that is hard for you right now when it comes to entrepreneurship. It can't be all, roses and sunshine type of a deal. What do you struggle with right now?
Yeah, it's really just figuring out how to scale the business and replace myself. That truly is what it is. When it comes to the branding process, doing the work, helping these companies as the one leading the strategy in the creative direction, I don't ever worry about that. Every project has its challenges, but they're just fun. It's just part of the process, and we do great work. It's really about also removing myself more from the work. So it's two parts. One, it's about figuring out, how do I scale this business before? I've never been a CEO before. Mm-hmm. I've never built a company before. This is the first time through. And I think that's what's so challenging and exciting about it. I just don't know what to expect when I get to the next stage of growth. And like I said, that's exciting. And then it's also about wanting to step back, because at times it's much more fun to do creative direction and strategy than it is to look over financials.
Sure.
And do company planning and deal with HR related issues. That doesn't excite me, but it's part of the process. And so it's about having that discipline and just about working through the process.
For our audience, right? Those that are listening, our audience consists of two decent sized groups. First time entrepreneurs that are a year or two into their first startup, and a lot of 9-to-5ers that are dreaming about, jumping ship and starting their own deal there. What kind of advice overall would you have for them? Something they can kind of take from you in this episode and implement it in their own lives to get to the next level, whether it's to quit their job and start something, or even as an entrepreneur to kind of just get, to the next milestone. What can they take away from you right now?
Yeah, I would just say to really take chances every day, to be able to manage your fear and to not ever settle for anything less than what your full potential is. I see so many people struggling with it. It's something I struggled with 5-10 years ago when I was working for other people and knowing that I was meant to be this entrepreneur. I never felt like it was the right time, or I had enough money, or I had the right knowledge, or I didn't have the right network to be able to do it. It's just a lot of excuses that all boiled down to fear and a lack of self-confidence. And the confidence comes with taking the chances. It's about taking that leap. No one's ever going to be ready for it, but it's just about doing it and realizing you only live once. I mean, how long are you really going to be around here? It could be 10 more years, 30, 40, 50 years. And how many of those years are going to actually be good life? So I think it's about having balance in your life too. But ultimately, when it comes that, your final moments of your life, you can't have any regret. I'm just really tuned into that right now. And failure is a part of the process. And that's another thing. It's just reframing what failure even means. I mean, without failure, you can't even have success. It's just two sides of the same coin, two ends of a pendulum. So it's just about embracing it.
Yeah, I love that advice, right? Like you mentioned, it's never going to be the right time, the perfect moment. Just go out there and take a chance and do it and prepare as much as you can. But, with the position that we're in, we have 366 episodes or something like that. We've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs. We host a lot of events. And a lot of times we have people talking to us like, I'm going to do this, but I'm waiting for this and this and this. And they're waiting for perfection, and it's never going to happen. I like your advice. Take a chance. If you fail, get back up and do it. That just kind of is the way it should be. Right? I mean, you're talking about the end of your life and looking back with regrets. That would be horrible, right? Knowing that you didn't take a chance when you could have because you were waiting for the right moment or for it to be perfect.
Yeah, and even looking back five years from now and just thinking that you wasted 5 years of life, that's bad in itself. So it all comes down to authenticity, and that's what I've built Ignyte around. And that's what I've built my personal brand around. And that's who I am. And that's part of the reason why I'm here, is to help others. Right now it's brands. One day it's going to be people. And it's really about helping people. And that's the psychology of it, is really figure out who they are and what they're best at. And it's deeper than leadership development. It's about finding that truth to why you exist. And once you figure that out, then it's, the fear disappears. The fear becomes not changing. Once you really figure out that, hey, this job is wrong for me. I should be out there doing my own thing, building this business that I dream about all day long while I'm sitting at work. Once you tune into that, it's just a matter of time. A human being can't live in that state of inauthenticity. The denial might brainwash them a little bit, but once they break through that, there's no turning around. They got to act.
Well, listen, no doubt that's valuable advice. I appreciate you sharing that with our audience. Now, for those that have listened to this episode that are reading your profile, your bio on our website, they want to connect with you, right? That they found something there that they liked, or they like the agency, or just your own personal story. Where can they find you online?
Yeah, a couple places. So you could find me on my Twitter account, twitter.com/Brian Lischer. That's BrianLischer. You could go to my personal website, brianlischer.com. Come check out Ignyte's website. That's ignitebrands.com, IGNYTE, brands, brands.com. A few different ways. Find me on LinkedIn. Definitely welcome a conversation with anyone, whether it's about business or taking that leap of faith. I'm here to help. So
I love it. So Outliers, you can go to outliermagazine.co. That's outliermagazine.co. First of all, subscribe to the podcast, rate, review it. But there you're going to be able to find Brian's links to his website, to his personal accounts, social media accounts. Feel free to reach out to him. Obviously, he brought the heat. He knows what he's doing, and he has a great story. Brian, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and for sharing your words of wisdom. This has been very valuable to my audience, so I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Ever. Anytime.
Absolutely. We wish you much success. And Outliers, we'll talk to you tomorrow.